So I'd like to turn to maybe Jean as a think tank leader. Can you give us an example of where the relationship and the kind of support has been particularly successful between donor and think tank, conversely unsuccessful?
Yes. Well, for me, the key feature of a successful relationship is one that is based on a genuine partnership where both the donor and the think tank have a shared vision and are committed to ensuring the success of the organization or any enterprise. And I think that the donor's support must not be a token, but it must be meaningful and substantial to make a difference. Additionally, the donor must commit long-term to, the vision, because in the case of research and advocacy, it takes time to make an impact. And I think that, it's a relationship that despite the support received, the think tanks must be left to set their own agendas and to drive that agenda. On the part of the think tank, they must be open and transparent and accountable for the funds that they receive, and they must also deliver results. And I like to refer to, a successful relationship, and that's the relationship or the arrangement that we have with the think tank initiative. I think that the think tank initiative provides us, first of all, with institutional support to strengthen 3 core aspects of our organization, and that's the research quality, the institutional capacity building, and to develop policy linkages. And this goes to the heart of our operations and has been very beneficial to us in the sense that we are able to undertake research that is of interest to our country, that is relevant to our country, that is driven by us, and it's more long-term, so we've sought to improve the quality of the research. We've also been able to recruit high-quality researchers who are there on a long-term basis, and we've also been able to develop policy linkages. For instance, we now organize a lot of seminars around the key issues and some of the recommendations of our research, and we link up with policymakers within the country, and we are developing relationships with them. Additionally, we've also developed a mailing list of 2,000 most influential people, and we are able to publish and produce policy briefs and ensure that the brief reaches the table of each policymaker or influential stakeholder within the country. And it has helped us to be more relevant and to contribute more meaningfully to policymaking in Ghana.
Can I just ask that? To push you on that, you're a highly successful individual in a highly successful think tank. So if you hadn't got TTI support, would you be in a very different place, or would you have found other ways to be as successful?
Well, we didn't have institutional funding, and we were depending mainly on project funding. So there was only so much you could pursue. So if you had, for instance, you had put out a policy recommendation or some research findings, you could, because you were limited with funding and you were working on a project, you cannot push it beyond the project. You did not have the funds to push it beyond. But the funding with the TTI has enabled us to continue and to sustain sometimes the advocacy on this and to use different avenues. So where the meetings don't work, we put out briefings in the newspaper, we circulate our briefings, put things on the website and so on. But I think the beauty of this relationship is that it gives us the flexibilities to set our own milestones and our own targets. And we have an open relationship with the program officers, and we discuss some of these arrangements before we come to, we define the contracts and so on. But I think that one drawback I see with the relationship, despite the success, is the fact that the funding is not long-term. I don't think that 5 years and hopefully 10 years would be enough time to make a difference. And in the world or in the area in which we are working in, we need long-term funding to be able to make a difference. And the 5 years, possibly 10 years, is not enough time. And I say this in the Ghanaian context because our policymakers are just beginning to become aware of, of the importance of policy and of the importance of research and policy formulation. And for instance, we have our current government has been in place for 4 years. We go to the elections in December, and we may well change governments. But, they've just, in the last 2 years, they've started to accept recommendations of policymakers. If we do change a government and we have a new government come in, it will take a year or two to get them to buy into that. And therefore, to have funding for 5 years and 10 years is not.
Okay. I think Shekhar wants to come in. So
I just wanted to both supplement what Jean said, but also perhaps challenge a bit of the last part. I think what's unique about TTI support is just that there isn't anything else like it. There used to be funders, Ford, Rockefellers, others, who did provide this kind of institutional support in the 60s, 50s, 70s, 80s, but that's dried up. And I would hazard a guess that participation in TTI by Gates, Hewlett, DFID, and IDRC, and the fifth Dutch funder, is perhaps at the riskiest edge of what, as funders, you are allowed to do. And it's absolutely unique. There is, even for a large institution like mine, which is entirely or mostly project-driven like Jean's, it's just completely, what it does is it breaks the disconnect, or it mitigates the disconnect between accountability, what think tanks do, and who pays for it. And it's a lot like budget support in the context of donor aid or multilateral aid. And the reason why we have pushed the budget support aspect of multilateral aid is precisely to get away from the problem of project aid or project loans, which made the execution of the project, the staff of the multilaterals which provided that kind of lending, more accountable to bosses in Washington or in London than to the citizens of that country or to the parliament of that country. And precisely by putting practically no conditionality on the support that TTI provides, you're putting the monkey on the backs of the think tanks. We need to show, the think tanks need to show that, because there is no constraint really on what we need to do or can do. And it is really an amazingly odd thing to have in this in this sort of state of the world. So I just want to supplement what Jean said, that it is really quite unique. And for that reason, and I know that there are all kinds of internal constraints in donor agencies, but this represents the riskiest. And what's nice about it is that there is a collective pool, so you're sharing the risk. Here are a bunch of very progressive donors who've come together and said, we will take a position in this risky venture. It's really a venture capital sort of move on the part of the donors. So I really want to supplement what Jean said. On this issue of long-term, whether this is long-term enough, from my own personal experience of having been on the other side of the table, I think this is fine. 5 years, 4 years is a very nice guaranteed source of funding. And especially with the kind of openness that we've seen, which, as Ruth said, I think on the second day, she herself had not seen, this kind of sharing about future plans, about the next phase with this beneficiary community is really quite unheard of in donor circles. So I want to compliment IDRC and TTI for really taking us into the back room and the thinking behind what will propel the second stage of this. So if this were longer, 10 years, 15 years, my fear is that there would be dependency. There would be all kinds of soft zones and comfort zones that we would get into. And at that point, pulling the plug becomes a very difficult thing for anybody to do. So even the big funders, the big untied funders of the 60s and 70s, made it a policy that you will probably get 2 or 3 rounds of such support, but then we will do a tie-off grant, as they used to call them, and essentially either contribute to your endowment, a significant sum of money, but that will be the end of the relationship. And we may come back to you 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, when we've seen what you've done. And I think many of the institutions that have benefited from that kind of support, including mine, I think have benefited from the fact that there was a clear horizon and we had to prepare for the precipice and the cliff. And at that point, we had to be on our own. So I would actually contest a little bit of this notion that the money should be there for a 10, 15-year period. I think it shouldn't be. It should be really only for 3, 4 years, perhaps a second stage if you qualify again, but then there should be an end of that relationship.